All right. We've hit the thing. We've hit the thing. Let's see. Are we live now? Let's see if this magic of StreamYards, how this works. Oh, it actually looks like we're working. All right, we're working now. Greetings, everybody. Ladies, gentlemen, everything in between, whatever you may identify as on this internet. I am the memes of destruction here. I am joined today with the common sense guy. Say hi, CSG.
Hi, CSG.
All right. And he's been kind enough to join me with this short little discussion because I just recently put out a little poll on Twitter. Should we consider legalizing dueling again? Just because it seems like with the current zeitgeist going on, just so many folks just hating on each other for like this and that, just for just disagreeing on just certain, just like seemingly just standard political issues we've argued about for years and just generating all this hatred. It's just like I've heard folks on whatever side you want to say where folks either saying it in jest with alluding to seriousness or just even folks outright calling for the death of those that they disagree with. And that's terrifying me. That's why I'm like, okay, how did we historically deal with folks that had truly offended people to the point where they felt like their honor had been tarnished? And this came about probably about 10 months ago, where I watched, as we were discussing before, CSG, a clip of an individual who was more of an SJW-ish individual, I would say, in my opinion. And he had highlighted, he's like, well, we used to call those fighting words. And then at a point, probably a couple of weeks after, all of a sudden I'm on a stream with MC, and MC utilizes the same argument. We call those fighting words. And then I paused, and I'm like, huh, that's interesting. So now that I've said a little bit of a preamble here, CSG, give us your thoughts, sir.
The reason why I wanted to come on and actually do the stream when you asked this was because it was something that really, should we say, tickled my fancy. Because it's something that I've actually been kind of alluding to and kind of putting forward. Because it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you are, you can go as far right or as far left as necessary to get to this point of discussion. That if you disagree with certain politics or political views, then all of a sudden it comes to the point of, right, we're going to fight, or right, these people don't deserve to live, or these people don't deserve the right to vote, or don't deserve this, don't deserve that. And I know that people will go, oh yeah, but Sargon's an idiot, but his horseshoe theory really is probably the most sensible thing that he's ever come up with, simply because it doesn't matter each side that you go through, it does get to that point where they are mirror opposites. It's just amazing. Like what you said, memes. It gets to the point when you are having a political discussion, and then the person goes, "I want to kill you," or "We should fight," or "We should do this." Where did that even come from? I just don't get it.
I think a lot of that's kind of always been with us, and I think that's more an issue oftentimes of pride. It's just kind of just like the whole peacocking thing. It's like all of a sudden somebody runs into somebody, instead of just saying, "Oh, pardon me," it's just like, "Oh," and somebody doesn't say anything. Someone's like, "Oh, well, that was rude." It's like, "Well, what do you mean being rude?" And you're just kind of escalating. Like it almost kind of reminds me of, see, in certain instances like that, I believe the term toxic masculinity may actually apply. See, and that's one of those things, because when a lot of times I hear a lot of the complaints from the greater skeptic community, whatever the heck you want to call it there, I hear these things, and then I'm like, okay, let me check out these individuals that are ruining society. It's like that whole thing with Sargon and Aquila and everything. It's just like, oh, okay, whoa, she's this SJW and stuff. Okay, so I go to her page. I'm like, let me find whatever the most controversial video would be. So I pick a video on intersectionality, and in that video, Miss Aquila obviously compares intersectionality to pizza with different toppings. And I watched that video. I'm like, well, it looks like a lovely young lady that's sharing her thoughts on intersectionality, and I want pizza now. That's what I took it as. I don't not take it like, oh my God. It's just it seems like in the era of everything being offensive, those that at least for a while said we shouldn't care about words that people say on the internet seem to care a lot about words people are saying on the internet.
Well, but as you quite rightly said, I mean, before we come on, it does seem to be, should we say, transferring from the internet culture that we seem to have cultivated, that it is a case now where people are saying, "Well, I'll fight you online," to the point of "I'll fight you in real life." Not to go on to the mental disturbia that is Mr. Worski, but the whole debacle of literally what you would call the internet tough guy of Tonka going, "Right, I'll fight you," to the actual embodiment of the whole situation of, "Okay, then let's fight in real life." Don't get me wrong, that's gone down to the individualistic level, but that is what we're talking about. The idea now that what happens on the internet of people saying we're going to fight each other, to now going into real life, well, let's all meet up as a big massive group. We're now protesting as right wingers, you're protesting as left wingers, let's fight in the middle of it. And you're actually getting people organizing those types of things, especially in the UK. I know that for a fact. I assume that's similar in the US at the minute.
Well, see, that's one of the big things, and just from my personal observation at the rally to restore sanity and/or turtles, which happened to be occurring during the Straight Pride Parade and the Let's Take Back Our Pride events, in my opinion, again, my personal opinion, I saw some potential escalations there, and if Boston PD was not out in the force it was, I could have easily seen a lot of those, at least what I viewed, situations potentially escalate. They could have gotten worse and stuff. And I mean, just power to the police and everything. I've heard some complaints saying that some folks were arrested, perhaps illegitimately. They're going to go through due process and everything, and everybody deserves their day. It's just that I feel like, and again, I think the person that said it best during that whole day, I heard some folks say, "Oh, we love what you're doing." People were trying to give me money because, like, "Oh, I love turtles," and I'm like, it is not directly safe from the turtles right now, so I'm sorry, I can't take your money. But my big thing is with this is there was a young lady that came by. She happened to be a little bit of an older black woman, and the way she summed it up was, "Y'all are idiots." And as soon as she said that, I'm sitting there, I'm like, she's absolutely right. She's like, we all lose in this case. All of us are out there. Had we been spending our time doing more productive things for society, we could actually truly be progressing and stuff. And it's just like, it was a troll event, and you're getting people all pissed off and everything. And one of the reasons you're doing it is because you're trying to get people pissed off and everything. And it's just that kind of comes from a lot of heart of it. Yeah, I get it. Is there a point? Yeah. Yeah, I even brought this up to X Mrs. Memes at one point, and trying to potentially character assassinate yourself and saying, I associate with these people. Does this make me like what you view these people are? Well, no. Well, why not? Is it just because you like me? Because you happen to be dating? Again, this is probably why I'm single at this point, but that's an entirely other story. So we'll
not really. Well, your singleness probably is a different story, but what you've literally just said is completely and utterly correct. It's the same thing as when you talk to your real life friends or your real life counterparts. When you start talking about different aspects of politics, you generally, should we say, self-censor yourself. You don't go into the heavy details, or at least most people don't. There are some that do, and good luck to you, but most people don't. And the reason why is because you're scared or worried, or should we say a slightly smaller word in comparison, where your apprehension is that you don't know what repercussions that you're going to get from the actual person that's standing in front of you. The one bad thing about the internet is that it's removed that apprehension. It's removed that worry about what could happen. It's removed that idea of, if you say something that's actually going to annoy me, I can't actually hit you and there's no repercussions from it. So you can say whatever you want to, let's say, rile somebody up to be able to get them to, should we say, be triggered, as the term is, and then absolutely just not get anything back from it apart from, having a laugh at it. Now, fair enough. People can do that. By all stretch of the imaginations, that's what the amazing thing about the internet is. You can go and do that. Problem is, if you try to do that in real life, down at the pub, down at the bar, you're probably going to get knocked out. Now, Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. But is that repercussions that could happen actually make people more, should we say, civil, rather than where we are now, where it's a case of people can lead to the point of saying that we're going to fight each other and be so hot-headed that some person is going to come down from Canada to go down to some middle part of America to fight somebody in a steel cage.
Well, exactly, and that was one of the things when I was kind of just starting. I was just putting together, as I said, like a little bit of almost a satirical video on the topic, and then as soon as I started delving into it, I'm like, oh wait, this is a lot more than just a simple, sir, I say, sir, you have offended me. Smack him with the glove. I demand satisfaction. I challenge you. It's a little more than that because there actually is historical precedent within these United States, and I'm sure in a lot of other countries and nations across the world. And just if we're getting to the point now where it literally does seem like we're in like a WWE universe now, with you've got the president of these United States who literally gave Vince McMahon a clothesline from hell on pay-per-view television and stuff. If this is the mimetic world that we're living in right now, so I can understand why folks are going insane because the game is completely different. And that's the thing. I think we're playing different games right now. So all I'm saying is, okay, if there are those that truly at this time are full with just so much hatred that they just want to just cause harm to those others that are out there. And if there are those on the opposition that truly feel the same way, rather than letting freaking everyone else get caught in the middle, like you were saying about just like potential public violence and stuff like that, and I mean, we can't forget that it's like her name was Heather Hare. She lost her life in Charlottesville. That is freaking true, man. These events did happen, and that was one of the things I did want to differentiate. And again, I'm going a wee bit off topic here, but even though if I joined Dave Rubin's his little thing because I'm like, wait, you're going to give us access to the same application so I can have my own application? Go on, I'm willing to shoot you a couple of bucks for this potential opportunity. My thing is, at one point he said, probably about a month or so ago, he's like, they haven't killed any of us yet. And just the way he said that and everything, and I sit back and I'm like, you do realize that's exactly what I think a lot of folks on the left are just feeling right now. It's like somebody lost their life, along with two police officers that died in that chopper crash that day. It's like lives were lost. So it's like, if it doesn't necessarily affect your particular whatever you want to view as community side or whatnot, it's like you seem to just kind of forget. And this is why I try to like hang out with a lot more, at least now, maybe some more folks on the left and poke over there, just because it's like there are horrendous stories that don't necessarily get covered. So that's why you need to kind of get that balance there. And this is why I say it's like, I think most of us, the vast majority of people, tend to want more or less the same ends. It's just the path by which we get there is the main thing we disagree upon. So what say you?
No, I mean, I'm quite with you, though. I'm not 100% sure on where the actual, should we say, beginning, where it started to change and the reasons why it manifests the way that it does. I would actually say it's more of a point of people that stick into their, should we say, echo chambers, where they don't actually deal with other people's opinions, especially in real life as well as just online. I actually think that most of the vitriol and most of the anger actually stems from the fact of not being able to express their point of view as eloquently as maybe one would like to. And I think that that stems from, at least in my opinion, more of the fact of not being able to articulate your own argument and not being able to convince that person by what convinced you. And I feel that is where most of this anger seems to be coming from, at least from the people that I've talked to, where it seems that they are coming across as, well, why can't I convince you? It must be my argument that's not good enough. I can't articulate it. I think it stems from a point of inner anger towards themselves that people can't see the way that they see. And because it now comes into a point of tribalizations with the different points of politics, where you're now under a point of a banner, you're either Republican or conservative, you're either Labour or Democrat, you're either a social democrat or democratic socialist, and we're now subsetting our own massive tribes, that we're now infighting between our own tribes. And that in itself, I think, is more dangerous than actually the left fighting the right or the right fighting the left. Because if you're actually so tribalistic in your own political approach that you're willing to destroy your own side, so to speak, then I don't know what to tell you, but there's a lot of anger that's mixed up there where people that generally, at least 90% of the time, will agree with you on most of your topics, where you would actually end up wanting to fight them or ban them or stop them from talking to you just because that they have a different opinion on something that matters emotionally to you rather than it being a fact or anything else. I think that's where we have the most major problem, that the fact that we're willing to fight ourselves and destroy our own selves. I think that's probably more of the problem or issue for me.
See, my big thing on a lot of this is, and I do think there's definitely something there because I used to be exactly like that. And I mean, in some ways, I think I definitely still am. It's one of those things where somebody says something or somebody does something, it just really bothers you. And sometimes there are deep-seated reasons for this. Sometimes we don't necessarily understand. But it's one of those things where I would have discussions back in the day, and it's like I feel like I'm like covering like all my points, dotting my I's, crossing my T's, all that jazz. I'm like, well, how can you not believe this and everything? And that's why in my more kind of just observing a lot of the side of the internet and everything, I kind of started to find a lot of things that I'm like, oh, I did that same thing, or my mannerisms have been exactly like that more or less at some point or another. So it's basically, oh, I was being disingenuous there, or maybe I was just trying to bolster something that I just thought I was supposed to say because that's what I was more or less taught to say. And did I really analyze it? Was I being skeptical to some of my own arguments and or things that maybe I just believed just because that was what I was brought up? And what I tend to find is, at least if you're doing things without malice in your heart, at least if you're trying to come from a good place, are you always going to like achieve everything you want? No, you're always going to have failure. Everybody freaking has failure. That's the thing. That's what makes us human. We're all perfectly imperfect creatures. But the big thing is, it's just, I almost feel like it's trying to like sort your mind out in a way like the world that makes sense. Because I even notice with even I think certain people that I was close to at some points, I would say something and like they're just kind of like trying to like sort their brains around and almost like audibly like just saying things out there. And I'm like, I'm kind of confused, but it's like it seems like people are reshaping like a lot of their world views in some ways. And some call it literally like just what is it? Cognitive dissonance, where basically it's literally like you're feeling psychic damage, something that's happening, like something that you believe to be true that may have been precious to you. If somebody is basically saying, yeah, that's a load of crap, it's like, well, yeah. And this is why I think you saw like a lot of the things with kind of like the whole maybe like kind of atheism thing, because I really wasn't part of any of that to my knowledge. But it's like when that was really going on, it's like, okay, well, why is this happening? Well, people are being skeptical. It's okay. Are some folks truly skeptical, or are they just saying, whoa, this is getting a lot of views? Oh, wait, I can just take the piss out of people and they're going to get all riled up and I'm just going to, and then you just apply Rule 15 of the internet. Everyone loves a good dumpster fire. It seems to be popular. Folks are going in the same direction. I'll be straight up. When I created this YouTube account, I was kind of going to go in the same direction and stuff. And if it wasn't for some perhaps wise old trolls on the internet and yeah, maybe I came to some realizations. I'm like, wait a second. Do I really believe this? Do I disagree with these people? Maybe I disagree with these folks on some issues, but I agree with them on some others. But maybe some of the things I agree with them, maybe I'm only, I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 7, maybe I'm like a 5. Maybe I'm kind of going in that direction. And other things I may disagree with, maybe I'm only like a 3 or something like that. It's like, I disagree, but I still understand where it's coming from. That's why when we end up having just these binaries, are you for this or are you against this? It really depends on how questions are asked. I mean, take a look right now. Apparently, there are a lot of folks in these United States of America that think like President Trump may or may not be president anymore. This is what I'm hearing. I'm just like, I don't really believe that. But then again, this is coming from my perspective because when I went to school, I remember they kind of explained this. It's like when a president is impeached, they're voted by the majority of the House of Representatives, which has happened. So this is the third time in our country's history where a president has been impeached. It is a process that then, at that point of impeachment, it then goes to a trial in the Senate. And the Senate is currently controlled by the Republicans, and we have a Republican president. I do not particularly see the Republican-controlled Senate removing a Republican president. I could be wrong,
No,
but that's the
I don't
thing.
either.
And this is the thing, because I even hear like Tim Pool, and Tim Pool, he's in this stuff, and even he messes up. He's like, I don't think President Trump's going to be impeached. It's like, no, he was. I'm just sitting there. It's like, yes, we all make mistakes, but it's just some people can compare it to like an indictment. Oh, he's been indicted. Kind of, sort of, but it's a very special thing for the president. So I realize we got a sidetrack. So basically, about Dueling, the whole thing is, I was literally, as I said, just going to take that clip from The Simpsons, where basically at one point, freaking, you got Skinner in there, and he needs to use the bathroom and everything, and then Moe's like, "Oh, it's past that heavyset guy," and Homer's like, "What do you mean heavyset?" He's like, "Well, I mean, you're not." No, he's like, you have offended me. He pulls out the glove and he slaps him. He challenges him to a duel, and then all of a sudden Mo gives him a free beer. He's like, wait a second. He's like, a free beer? You don't give anybody a free beer. He's like, well, I've never been slapped with no dueling glove. And I just sit back and I'm watching it, and I'm like, wait a second. Is this just not positive reinforcement? If something is done, if somebody is highly offended about something and they end up taking more of an extreme action, it's like all of a sudden folks are like, whoa, hey, a lot of folks don't want conflict. A lot of folks just want to live their lives and be left alone and want to avoid that chaos. So if all of a sudden that chaos is introduced, if all of a sudden someone's like, have a beer, it's like, wait a second. A little glove slap. It gets me things that I want. Well, why would I stop doing this?
Exactly. Which is why I think a lot of the people, especially on the internet, get to the point of where they start trying to get the person so riled up that the person doesn't want to speak to them anymore. And because the person doesn't want to speak to them anymore, that classifies to them as they've won the argument. And it really does come down to some people, which is a win and a loss. And I've never really understood that, especially when it comes to politics. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're actually having a fight, or if you're having a computer game, or, something that actually requires a win and a loss, if you're actually having political discourse, you're not actually really winning an argument. You're not actually losing an argument. You're actually coming to a form of an agreement that you agree with certain aspects, you agree with other aspects, you disagree with this, you disagree with that, so on and so forth. But it really does seem that now with the internet, it's come to the point of, well, if I can get the person to stop talking, then I've won. And as you well know, memes. I don't know about some of the people in the chat and whatnot. I've talked to black nationalists and black supremacists. I've also done it with white nationalists and white supremacists, and I had better conversations. Not all the time, but I've had better disagreements, should I say, more respectful disagreements with some of them than I have done with, say, with the Mad Libertarian or MC or a couple of other people from that aspect, on aspects that I've disagreed with, because I see them as friends. So I feel that I have to fight my corner more viciously. And when they don't understand what my point of view is, I get more defensive and more angry, as I said before, at myself for not being able to articulate it properly, or to a point where they could understand it more. I really do think that when you have the de-association of being able to speak to somebody, that you tend to be more respectful, to the point of where you do know the person, you know that you can take certain liberties, as in you can have that banter, you can raise your voice a bit more, you can call them all of the names under the sun, and generally most of the time you'll be okay. Now, that doesn't mean that I have a problem with the other people. I really don't. I never have done. But it looks that way. And that can escalate. And that, as we would say in Britain, the storm in a teacup, which is a case of the actual initial moment of being so angry that there's a massive storm whirl up in a teacup, but you don't really want it to go anywhere. And I think that is escalating on the internet scale, where you're getting to the point where you're so entrenched in that moment, where you're really thinking that this moment, this particular moment of trying to convince this person matters so much that you're willing to almost put your life on the line for it, as you're literally almost willing to fight for it, even though technically you're not, because it's the internet. But that's now transmuting, and it's transferring to real life, and that's never a good thing. I mean, you look at how Boris Johnson and everything else like that won the general election, and then straight away, as soon as he did that, you had our version of the left going straight to the streets saying that they want Boris Johnson to die, and everybody else that voted for him is stupid and idiots, and so on and so forth. Now, don't get me wrong, some people would think the same as them, but the opposite way round. When is it a case of now that we have the idea that, yeah, you can say what you like, but surely there should be some form of respect between adversaries? Surely there should be some, shouldn't there?
Well, that's one of the things. And CSG, I apologize for using you as a little bit of a case study, going back on kind of what you said before, because I saw some of your interactions when they were a bit more negative at one point. This was a while ago, and I looked at what happened, and I noticed one of the things that was commented in there, and it was something about respect. And I looked at that, so I figured, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to speak with like a similar individual about this, I'm like, okay, well, what should I do if this person maybe has some preconceived notions based upon their life experience or whatever, that I might not necessarily be somebody that's on their side. I could be somebody that's maybe trying to undermine them. Well, let me kind of just go out of the way and treat them with respect. Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Just those things that at least I think we're both of the same age, where at least we were told we were supposed to kind of use those things by some folks and everything. I really think there is something to that there. Just being able to at least be polite. Will folks always be polite back? No. It's unfortunate. But you know what? If you're saying please, thank you, yes, sir, no, sir, things like that, it's probably a lot harder for that person to do it. Will some folks still do that? Yeah, sure. Folks will do that, but at least it makes it harder. There's a good chance they're going to feel like an asshole. And if there's anyone else around, who do you really think the asshole is going to look like? And that's the thing. And then you have the whole application of social pressure, and that's one of those things, because a lot of these arguments, you look at what's going on when somebody makes a statement. It's like, okay, they made a statement, so this is in the negative of this particular issue, thereby they must disagree with all of this, where in certain cases they may agree with 70, 80, maybe even 90%, but on that one little bit they don't necessarily agree. That's why I'm sitting back, I'm like, do we need a 7-point scale? Because you see all these like ratings charts and everything, and I'm sitting back here, I'm like, well, I see like 5-point scales and 10-point scales, and the problem with like 10-point scales is, where is the center? Is it a 5? Is it a 6? Are you slightly for? Are you slightly against? Some folks may feel right in the middle. And if you get 5, it's like, okay, but if I shift over 1, then that means I agree. But then I really agree. And then that's why I'm like a 7-point scale. Give somebody, just because people like the number 7, apparently it's lucky. You can be right in the center there, and then you have 3 degrees of separation, which I'm like, at least from statistics, 3 degrees of standard deviation usually mean, yeah, it's a lot of it. So is it perfect? No, but I'm like, I think that's one of the things. I'm like, is this really, because again, we tend to, I think both of us here tend to err on the side of free speech and everything, with, again, what the established constraints that we know, not inciting violence and stuff to other people. I think a lot of it does come down to is it's just proper filters. Like, if you don't want to see like terrible stuff, it's like, okay, I only want a 1. I want cat videos, and I want like the Green Brothers. Like, give us that, and we're happy. And then you slowly go up there, and then it's like, I want to see the absolute worst things that may exist on this internet of stuff and things. You go to a 7. It's unrestricted. It's full algorithmic. You can see whatever you want, browse at your own risk. I think that's a better thing, because one of the big arguments I heard from like a lot more SJW and folks on the left is like, I don't want to see a Sargon video popping up when I'm looking for feminism and stuff. No, that bothers me. I don't want this popping up in my autoplay and everything. So I think that's one of the things where it's like, if you do that, and then you give, again, the ability to mute and block, because I mean, if Twitter didn't have those features, I'm not sure it would still exist. I think it may or may not have imploded, because I think that's one of the core things that Twitter really did get right, why it's been able to exist. Because as toxic as it can be, you're looking at that, it's like, okay, if you don't want to hear stuff, you could upload a block list and everything. Some folks will say it's censoring, but doesn't that come down to freedom of association? Because that's the other thing. So, and my just quick question on this is, when folks give the public park scenario, and I'm just curious your thoughts on this, because this kind of ties into what we started at the beginning about the whole getting so potentially offended or whatnot that you might challenge somebody to an actual duel. Is I hear the public park scenario. Okay, so the internet, it is now the new public space. Okay, fair
Public
enough. Let's
square.
public square. Exactly. Thank you. So if this is the public square, okay. So what happens if someone comes up to you public square and just starts cursing at you? Okay, well, you can walk away or whatnot. You can just keep going. However, if that same individual continues to follow you and continues to harass you, at that point, they may be creating a public disturbance. At that point, then you have the ability, if somebody's creating a public disturbance and it may be potentially leading to violence or causing a spectacle, you can call the local authorities and they can come down there and say, what's going on? Why don't you folks just go your separate ways? Or if someone keeps escalating, they may actually detain them and place them under arrest and follow due process.
Sure.
That's the thing. But who are the authorities on the internet? You don't necessarily have an invested body. You have a private company.
It depends on the platform, though.
And that's the thing. Nothing is necessarily universal. We have different rules in different places. So if you got a bunch of folks coming from Tumblr over to Twitter, or a bunch of folks from like Twitch coming over to YouTube, and things are slightly different, that's the thing. And this is because when you have like 100+ page agreements, ultimately when you go through that, the companies are protecting themselves for legal reasons. What I read through from when I try to read through some of those things is, you have no rights, you have no rights, you have no rights, company owns everything, blah, 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 have a nice day. It's like, I understand why they do that. My big thing is, you need to boil it down. If you could have 10 or 12 pages, just listen, these are these things, we're trying to do our best. You can't make everyone happy. That's the thing.
But that's the thing, though. You shouldn't have to make everybody happy, and anybody that thinks that you should make everybody happy at all times is always going to be disappointed. You cannot please all of the people all the time. You'd be lucky to please some of the people some of the time. The only way that you can actually deal with this type of situation, especially with a platform basis, is you set up the rules, you boil the rules down so that they're easy and digestible. Let's take Twitter for an instance. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been on the receiving end of some interesting situations with Twitter myself, but the rules are there for a reason. You can appeal the rules. You sign up to deal with this. Now, I know a lot of people go, yeah, but you don't do that with a society. Nah, you don't necessarily sign an actual contract, but generally you do have a social cohesion. You do have a social contract in its, should we say, idea, where if you're in a society, you agree to abide by those set of rules, those sets of principles, those sets of morals, those sets of ethics. If you break those ethics, break those morals, so on and so forth, then you have repercussions either socially, economically, or by actual law definition. Now, when it comes to the point of being harassed, I think it's much easier to deal with harassment online than it is to deal with offline. Simply because, if you really wanted to, you turn the computer off. I mean, that will cure everything straight away. If it's in real life and in person and you really do have that one asshole, sorry, I don't know if I can swear or not on your channel.
I'm not too worried. That's not the worst thing that's ever been said.
No worries. But if you do really have those types of people that are generally coming up to you and speaking to you and shouting at you in your face, and you're like, look, step back. I don't really want anything to do it. I agree with what you're saying. I'm going to leave you. You carry on doing what you're doing. And they're following you. It's very hard to deal with that situation without escalating it from either their point of view or from your point of view. Because it comes to a point of, are you actually going to be able to sit there and wait for the police to come in? At least with something like Twitter on the internet, for instance, if you need to, you can just report those people and then you can get rid of them. Or even easier, you can mute those people so you never have to listen to them again. Or you can block them so you don't even have to see it. So carry on.
Oh, no. I was going to just kind of take the antithesis on that argument. Definitely what you laid out there. In a lot of cases, historically, no, you're absolutely right. It's just, this is why I keep on asking people, what's the difference between the internet and real life? Because I do think we're just really starting to see a meshing of different dimensions of reality right now. And it's getting harder to tell which one is which now, if there even truly is a difference at this point.
Before you move on, I have a quick question for you
Sure.
on that. Do you think that the meshing that seems to happen, do you think that that's because people themselves are, should we say, initiating that meshing, because when I was younger, the internet was the internet and people were people. Real life was real life. You know, you separated the two. You had your internet friends, you had your proper friends. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And now it comes to the point of the internet is real life. If you don't have the internet, you don't have a life. And is that an antithesis that's come from us as human beings, and that as forcing that onto ourselves as real life? Or is it still exactly the same as what it was when me and you were growing up, where no, we can separate the two, we just choose not to?
I think it's a fusion of the two. You know, whole fusion, ha! But but seriously, because a lot of times, like we took a look at it, and it was a game. Because like I used to do some like the old school like America Online like role playing and like some of those like chats and stuff like that. Like I had fun. I had my internet life, and it was basically a game. At some points, yeah, you might be on different sites, different places around this internet of stuff and things, and you may have kind of like different personas, this, that, or the other thing. So you kind of treat it as a game. You kind of maybe poke fun, you jab a little here, there, you do a little bit of trolling in that. But if that is only your internet persona, because what I've heard from folks on the right, and where I've heard folks say, "Oh, of course I'm playing it up. I'm doing this for a show. I'm making it more of a spectacle, like for like bread and circus." And I'll hear
Yeah.
folks on the left more or less say the exact same thing. They're like, "Oh no, I'm playing more of a character and stuff." I'm like, "Wait a second." So we're having folks that freely admit to playing things up and playing characters, having these discussions at each other, basically just creating an over-the-top show of things that they're pushing to the extreme.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, you can do that, but the point where it starts affecting our political leaders and stuff, where they start saying, get in people's faces, doing this and that. I mean, that's sounding a lot like we're starting to push going towards violence and stuff like that. And my big problem with that is, I would say, of a person generally of the left, is that the problem with that is that's going against one of the core arguments of that. If you're going around saying very hateful, provocative things about certain groups or communities, that may end up leading towards hate towards them. And then if you end up actively engaging, doing that same thing against those that you dislike, disagree with, or view as your rivals, or at worst even your enemies, you're essentially engaging in something that you're saying that they shouldn't do. And that's my concern, because if we're going to hold something as a principle, you have to hold it as a principle if you truly want. If you're going to violate the principle, we have violated the Constitution of these United States. And it's just, one does not simply violate the Constitution of these United States. You do not do that easily. I mean, that's ultimately basically in times of war, and we have to acknowledge that horrible things have happened. So we try to do our best. You want to keep the republic together, and it's just, that's why I kind of, just to circle it back around to our initial topic, is the whole thing with dueling is, all right, if there are folks that truly want to do this, do you necessarily need to do the whole pistols at dawn? MC's solution is, we'll duel with lawn swords till first blood. That's a potential thing. If you have two consenting adults that sign up for this, and it is actually sanctioned, because let's face it, there was precedent. You did have Andy Worski, you did have Tonka Saw. They were going to have an official match. It didn't end up happening, but the potential was there. So I'm like, okay, if you want to have, because even just YouTube, what was it, that Greg Paul, something like that, whatever. Basically, they end up having, yeah, exactly. They have a big boxing match. That's big. Okay, you have two folks that have
Logan Paul. Sorry, Logan Paul.
Exactly. Whatever. I'm sorry. My apologies. I know the Paul brothers. I confuse them. But you know what? They're doing what they're doing. They're making money off of it. And do I hear folks outcrying it? You can say morally you think it's reprehensible just because folks are doing it. But you know what? If that's a way for physically people to get their stress out, I mean, that's why I'm entertaining this idea as a potential topic. Just because for me personally, the way I used to get a lot of my stress out was I would go to concerts and mosh and get the crap beat out of me, just running around, just kind of pushing and shoving and stuff like that. By the end of the day, it's like, you're freaking dead tired. You listen to some good hard rock music, and then you give a hug to the dude that freaking just knocked you over, because there was a code to the pit. You get knocked down.
Yeah.
Everyone goes and checks on somebody as well. That was one of those unwritten rules. And at this point with the internet, I feel like we're going through our social media adolescence, we're kind of confused about a lot of this stuff. What is the right way to interact on this internet?
That I completely and utterly agree with, especially the last part. I honestly do believe that with this social engineering, and I'm using that word as I want to, so don't think that I'm mischaracterizing what I'm saying. We are socially engineering the internet. We are pushing the internet to the forefront of how we now choose to socialize. We now will have more friends and feel more like ourselves on the internet than we ever would or would have done or would have been in real life. Now, that does one of two things. That now then puts ourselves into the idea of we can be ourselves on the internet without any repercussions, which means that we now look for that as our release and that way of being. So we're our true selves on the internet rather than actually, which would be the second thing, which would be the idea of actually being with your friends and show you know when you say that you have 3 to 4 different masks that you show one mask to how you would operate to somebody that you would be up the utmost respect, so say at work. Then you have your mask for your family, when you put it on for a good show at the Christmas with tidings and whatnot. Then you have your mask for your friends and your misses and your partners, your close people. And then you have that one last mask that you don't show anybody. The internet is now becoming where we show that mask, where we show our true selves. And if anybody knows that when they start showing their true self, we want to be able to produce that because that's our true selves. Our id then decides and pushes us to be able to do that. Our subconscious decides that that's what we want to do. And the more that we actually listen to our id, our subconscious, the more it's never a good thing because our morals, our superego, actually never has a chance to be able to counteract that or counterbalance it. And now we get to the points of where we are now, where we don't know where the boundaries are. We don't know where we can go off and fight those people or where we should draw the line in the sand to say, look, right, okay, I'm going home. Screw you guys, I'm taking the ball and I'm going. That type of thing. We don't know where our breaking point is anymore. We don't know where that point is where we stop because we keep on going because it hasn't been drawn yet. So it's not like when you're a teenager where you can have that bigger person or that person that's got a bit of a temper that's like, look, fuck off. You don't have that on the internet. You just carry on all the time. We don't have that boundary. We don't have that social point where society can look at you and go, look, you're being a cunt. We don't have that on the internet. Nobody has that. We try to do that, but it's never going to work because you don't have any sort of actual repercussions to it apart from being banned off of a platform and then using a different email address or a different IP address to be able to get back on it again and then still being that person and then wearing it as a badge of honor going, yo, I got banned, I'm still on it.
It becomes a video game. You just keep on putting more quarters into the machine.
Exactly that. But yeah, I mean, with the idea of fighting and everything else like that, I do think that it comes to a point where, yeah, there is always ways where you can put that anger, put that steam into being more productive. The thing is with the internet, we don't have that. We don't have that outlay. We don't have that reason to be able to channel it into a positive outcome because we've been conditioned from how the political discourse has been, the religious discourse, just discourse in general on the internet has turned to a point of point scoring, where it comes to the point of I'm going to beat you because you have a different opinion to me, and watch me do this because you guys agree with me. So we're all going to dogpile this person, and vice versa for anybody else. We don't have that point of being able to do it constructively anymore. It's now become a show.
I think Twitter kind of really enlightened me to that when I created Twitter like a year and a half or so ago, and all of a sudden it's like you make very well thought out comments that seem very neutral down the middle of the road. Maybe you get occasional like, maybe occasionally if it's something that somebody feels strongly about, maybe they'll follow you. You see something that is completely salacious, you get a bit more salacious, you say something a bit over the top. Oh, look, you get a whole bunch of likes. Oh, look, you get a whole bunch of folks. A bunch of folks start, wait, what's going on there? You get those dopamine releases. And it's kind of like you said, we literally have socially constructed and prepared ourselves in this particular way to respond to society because, and one of the things I noticed, because it's like, all right, I I say a few nice things about maybe a policy that the president had enacted, all of a sudden it's like, oh, a few conservative, oh, maybe you lose maybe a bit more of a leftish person or two, and then you say something nice about like Speaker Pelosi, or just kind of like trying to like vouch for her, saying, listen, no, you're making this up too much, and then oh, look, some folks on the right, and maybe a few. And that's the thing, because a lot of folks, they literally, we're treating each other like we have cooties now. Oh, you have Trump cooties, or oh, you have AOC cooties or stuff. It's really, come on. That's back in middle school and stuff. And this is literally the temperament we're taking.
Yep.
And that is one of my big arguments against the president, is because, let's face it, leadership starts from the top down. The president isn't really doing much to quell these things. Does he try on occasion? Yeah, but then he goes out to a rally, throws a bunch of people under the bus, and what the heck do you think's going to happen? I mean, I would have loved to see in the grand pivot, and then have Donald Trump just kind of become like the goofy billionaire from Monopoly. That he gaffes a bunch in a while, but at least I think the dude's trying to come from a good place. But the problem is, it's just politically right now, what's his incentive to do anything different? Because he got elected the president of the United States by saying a whole bunch of salacious BS. So it's like, why should he stop? And this is the reason why it's like, yeah, I may have voted for the man back before, because I'm like, ultimately, the reason why I didn't is when I hear Secretary Clinton at that time say that, oh, wipe service like with a cloth. See, I actually believe Hillary Clinton is a brilliant woman, and that answer was just so disingenuous and bothered me to no end.
Yeah, sure.
And the fact that we threw Martha Stewart in jail for lying about a stock tip, I'm sitting there, I'm like, you know what? I live in Massachusetts. Is it really going to affect it? No. I'm going to have a protest vote. If he could get up to 47, 48% of the popular vote, maybe folks say, maybe we should. And Dude Man won. But at this point, the country is just getting so divided that's just so unhealthy. And just this is why. Can I agree with him on some of the things? Sure. But just morally right now, it bothers me. And
no, I agree.
I'm getting concerned.
No, I completely not agree. I mean, I would actually add to what you've just said, and I would actually like to point out that the reasons why people feel that they either got to stick with Trump or go against Trump, and you don't see too many people doing the middle of the road thing, as you said, where some of them are good, some of them are bad, the normal aspect of life where you not so partisan on one side and saying Trump's great because he's not, and he's not a racist because he's not. So you don't have those middle of the road people anymore. You don't have that aspect of, if you say that Trump's this or Trump's that, or if you say that he is this or he isn't that, you're now either against him or with him. And as soon as somebody makes that distinction of you, for some reason it is so hard for them to then change that distinction of you. You're now a Trump supporter. No, I just support something that he may or may not have done. I'm now against Trump. Oh, you're always going to be against him. No, I was just against something that he said at some point, and I think that he lied about this or misread or misquoted what he said here. That we don't have that anymore, because now we're so tribalistic. We don't have the middle of the road people anymore, where you can have the arguments. You either, as you said before, the binary, where you either are or you aren't. Not that you want to take everything as an individual topic. You don't have, as the left would always like to say, you don't have that nuance that comes with any political decisions anymore, or even discourse anymore. You just have the case of, are you this way or are you that way? We like to use as humanity schemas, which is quick decisions, quick mantras to be able to put things into boxes. So if you were to say, oh, I like Trump's immigration policy about building a wall, schema, right, that's it, you're a Trump supporter. You may absolutely hate everything else that he's ever said, ever done, but because somebody said that and that's what they got of you, that's it, you're a Trump supporter. And that first impression is so hard to get rid of now, because people are so set in their political particular way that they don't want to change it, because it destroys their worldview. I've noticed this a lot with Twitter, where if you start talking to somebody that does have a different political point of view to you, that they think that you are attacking them, that because you have a disagreement with what they're saying and their idea, for some reason they honestly think that you're attacking them as a person. And I've never understood that. I never will understand that. where your ideas now become your identity. And that does stem from identity politics, that who you are represents what you should be thinking politically. And that should never, ever be the case. And the more that we go down that road, the more that we will see this idea of civil war, the idea of, let's use the American Civil War, that you're for slavery, you're not for slavery, you are a white supremacist, you are a fascist. We're going down those roads because we're forcing ourselves to go down those roads because we don't want to talk anymore.
And that is very dangerous right there. And you want to know what CSG? I think it's a lot easier than some of us may imagine, because even in the DMs earlier, when you were just proving the counter argument, when you said, I am offended about those things, the way you wrote that, I'm like, wait, is he actually offended about this? Because I realize this is a very salacious topic there. And then I'm like, wait, it is CSG. So
yeah, I'm not really offended by anything.
no, but what I'm saying is just, even knowing you, even having discussed very difficult topics with you over a few years, I looked at that really quickly. I'm like, wow, is this the point where CSG is just, he's done with memes and stuff like that? Have I gone beyond the pale? I'm like, it wouldn't surprise me. So like, at least for a moment, I entertained that. I'm like, I know this dude. I'm like, now I imagine, I'm like, what if I'm just a random dude on the internet and all of a sudden someone comes in there and says that, even if just, even as a steel man, or just a counter thesis there, even just saying let's entertain the idea at some point, if someone just kind of glances over real quick and they see certain key words, like you were saying, certain schemas that they just kind of pick up on, that just fit in just what they know to be true within, based upon their lived experience and stuff, you're going to look at that and you're going to be like, quickly, it's like, okay, this person is for the wall and stuff like that. Thereby, I have seen and been told that folks that are for this are obviously racist, bigoted, and obviously terrible people as well. All of a sudden, that clicks on, and you're projecting it to them. And I'm just sitting back, and I'm like, I do remember a number of Democratic and Republican presidents saying something that we need a southern border barrier, or something like this. And it's just, a lot of this gets drowned out, because when you got like somebody like a President Trump who's like, I will build a great wall, and this and that, just using the over-the-top rhetoric. I'm just like, okay, you are, and MC will disagree with me on certain points, but I'm just like, I really think this is an escalation. Just some of these situations that seem a lot more extreme that are now being proposed. Maybe they were being proposed before. Maybe we're just hearing about them more. But when I'm hearing certain laws and regulations, like now this stuff going on in Virginia, if it gets to the point where it's like I start seeing like a Mr. Medicare going around and like actually making a video on politics, I'm like, oh, this can't be good. This is probably not a good sign of what may be happening. And now what are you seeing? You're seeing the inverse of what you saw before. All of a sudden, you see the right folks kind of like cracking down, doing things. And again, a lot of this, people are trying to follow the law. Things will be challenged. We'll see what happens. But if all of a sudden you saw clampdown on immigration, okay, what do we see? The rise of like sanctuary cities. Okay, now all of a sudden you're starting to see clampdown on firearms. And I mean, just even take just the whole fact that you're potentially talking about sending the military to go round up people's firearms. Just aside from that, now you're starting to see the rise of sanctuary areas for firearms. So you're kind of seeing like a similar thing. And I'm sitting back, I'm like, these seem like similar patterns based upon different issues. And that's why I say it's like, you never know what is truly important to another person, because they likely have their own reasons for that. Maybe it was the way they were brought up. Maybe it was their lived experience. Maybe that's just kind of how they are. You don't know.
No, I completely not agree with you. I was having a discussion with somebody that had the name and tag as a libertarian. And no, it wasn't Mad Dodge. And he was saying something, or they were saying, because I don't know gender or whatever on that one. They were saying in general that they wanted to restrict people's voting rights. And I obviously pointed out the simple fact of, regardless of what you feel about these people or what you think of these people, regardless about IQ levels and what on and so on and so forth, you have the mantra and naming tag as a libertarian, but yet you're trying to propose restrictions onto people's liberties and freedoms. How can you square that circle? And obviously, I never actually got a response because, it's Twitter. But so many people have I want to say bad takes, but I want to try and be as genuine as possible with this because it is an important topic rather than, being salacious with it. It does come to a point where you listen to certain people, and exactly as what you said, Memes, that if you push one doctrine too far, then the opposite side of that argument is going to push back. And we're at this point now where you have, let's say, the left versus the right. Now, there are so many different nuances in that statement in itself, and depending where you are, but let's just use that as a colloquial and easy generalization. If you have the left versus the right, now let's take something as simple as healthcare, where I think most people would come down to the agreement of saying people should be able to get treated for being injured. Now that you can disagree with the methodology of how you would pay or not pay for that, but we can all agree on that. So why can't we actually come to the points that we agree on and then work ourselves out rather than first butting heads on what we disagree? Because we've been taught to go into our tribe that one side is better than the other and the other side is horrible regardless. They're not real people. We had this in the general election for the UK, that people that voted for the Conservatives didn't care about the NHS. And that's just categorically incorrect. It really is. But that's now a political mainstream talking point. It's not something that's now done online. That's now something that's in political discourse, in our media, in our news, in real life, where if you voted Tory, you are now a horrible person that doesn't care about this. It really does worry me, as you quite rightly said, it really does worry me that it comes to the point where those quick schemers are now what degrades different people's opinions to be able to wipe them off to say that their opinion doesn't matter, because that's what it's done for. It's not done to have the discourse, it's not done to be able to have a genuine conversation. It's to poison the well to say that this person's not worth talking to because of these reasons.
Hmm. That sounds kind of dehumanizing, doesn't it?
It is very dehumanizing for both sides, regardless of what political persuasion anybody would be. It's very dehumanizing to be able to limit a person's talking point to their identity.
Yeah, and you kind of see how this goes, and this is what I've just kind of tried to been pointing out for about the past year when I started to make some of these observations. It's just like, okay, it's okay if you're going to say we do not want hateful speech. Okay, so what is that precisely? And if
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you start going through, and if you're just going to take it just the words themselves, we don't like these words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can get rid of those folks. And then if you have folks that don't like other folks, and then they start to use hateful speech, and we're starting to see a lot more of this. You're starting to see a lot of folks on the right and the left
Yep.
starting to get banned for very hateful speech. It's just at that point, it's kind of like the erosion analogy is
Yep.
kind of very simple to the point where you just have cat videos, and then cats become too offensive. Then you only have kitten videos, and then I don't know. Do we just end up like going completely into the Ouroboros, or where do we end up?
God knows. But to go on to the point of the hate speech in itself, which I'm still putting it into the theme of the actual stream,
Hmm.
where you have, let's say, the left that introduced the idea of certain things being hateful speech. Let's say that we agree with that aspect. Let's say that we do agree with it. Now, hypothetical, so everybody in the chat, pipe down. I don't actually agree with it, but let's just go with it for the moment.
Hmm.
If you're then going to say these certain things that you can't talk about a person's identity and degrade them on their identity because it's hateful, then that logical conclusion is that you cannot then beat people up because they wear a Trump hat. But if you point that out to certain people, no, they cannot be done for hate speech or done for a hate crime because they're a Trump supporter. I don't get that logic. If we're going to keep it for the people that you agree that it should be put for, why isn't it not universal? It seems that you're picking up on a point to actually use it as a political point scoring measurement rather than it actually being for the benefit of anybody. You're doing it to beat the stick of the opposition rather than actually protecting anybody. And I've noticed that a lot, that people will use different political situations to their benefit to degrade the opposition, but not use it when it's on their side to point it out that you shouldn't do this.
That definitely that's nail right on the head. Because when I started just kind of investigating, just kind of looking at some of these things and hearing folks actually more or less ask that question, it's like sitting down with the other side. What I heard literally more or less from both sides, just my experience was we can't trust them. They're disingenuous. They do exactly what you said. It's like they'll highlight these things when it helps their side. However, if something of the same ilk happens to their quote unquote side, they just completely ignore it. And the terrifying thing is that that really tends to be the case.
Very much so. Let's take the instance of the Me Too movement, the Me Too era that may or may not still be around. You have people that were against it for certain reasons, and you have people that were for it for certain reasons. But when it was somebody that was on the left that got caught for the Me Too era, amazing how many right-wing supposedly supporters jumped onto that movement, and vice versa for the left to the right. It was used as political point scoring rather than it actually being what it should be, and to point out that people were being raped and being using their power to abuse people. What's wrong with that in principle? If you're going to point out people that are abusing their power to get what they want off of other people that don't have enough power to be able to go against it, who would actually be against that? Nobody. But because it was politicized, people were against the political point rather than the actual issue that was actually being brought up.
Well, that's one of the things, just because, and I think to bring it all the way back around to kind of what you were saying at the beginning of the stream, CSG, is a lot of times it depends on how we articulate these particular points. And especially if we're talking about issues that, at least historically, we like religion and politics, we often didn't have these discussions on. Then I mean, it shouldn't it be obvious that like we're going to have some very messy discussions. We're going to have offense, because it's like to talk about something that's deeply important. This is something that Professor Peterson would highlight. It's just like somebody is going to be offended. Like if something is truly important and needs to be discussed because it's of an integral part of society, guess what? The reason why it probably hasn't been discussed because it's probably not easy. It's probably pretty hard. It's probably difficult. There's probably a lot of things that go on, and especially folks that haven't necessarily openly expressed because they're afraid of whatever side it may be coming down with either a ban hammer, they're going to get mobbed by a bunch of people's followers because somebody's going to try to retweet them and show that they're silly, or do like a response video or something. And there is something to that. No, my mind actually went to somebody highlighting a somebody wearing a feminism T-shirt within a particular place that their work more or less made them work, and all of a sudden they're getting some hate. But no, just in regardless, and this is why I say it's like we need to try to do better to handle criticism, and at least before turning somebody on blast, if you can at least make an honest, good faith attempt to try to deal with it behind the scenes, because there's a difference between just you dealing with someone behind the scenes. Somebody says something, maybe they reference them, maybe they're just, you reach out to them, you go back and forth, you try to solve it. If you don't feel the issue has truly been solved, and then you truly feel like you need to turn someone on blast or something, at least you went through the process. You made a good faith effort before you do that. It's just we don't really incentivize the background, let's just keep this stuff kosher now. We're in the clickonomy of, oh my God, can you believe the stupid stuff that person did? And rule 15 of the internet, everyone loves a good dumpster fire.
Oh, of course, everybody likes taking the piss out of somebody, but I mean, when it comes to a point of when you're ready to fight somebody because of an idea, because of something that they've said that's not going to actually be implemented, it really does boggle my mind that people that claim to be civilized and proponents of the left or proponents of the right or proponents of free speech in any sort of shape or form come out and say that, look, what you've said has offended me so much, or the fact that you're not listening to me has offended me so much that I'm willing to put my mind, my body, and your mind and your body on the line to be able to beat my opinion into you, and that somehow then ratifies my opinion to you. Like, generally the argument is won by who is stronger. No, the argument isn't won by who's stronger. It just means that you've beaten the person into submission has made them submit to your argument, not the fact that it's correct. Now, some people would say, well, that's pacifistic, but no, it's actually to the point. If you're actually debating points and issues, then you haven't actually won or made your point coherently, or enough to change somebody else's mind. You forced it upon them. Now, are you actually a proponent of free speech, or actually are you for an authoritarianism or totalitarianism that you say that you're against?
And that's one of my big things, just because a lot of times, especially if you're having either in any debate, and especially here on the internet, what do you see? Especially if you get more than two people in a given chat or conference, there's always lag, this, that, and the other thing. But let's face it, a lot of times, a lot of the more dominant personalities will end up taking over. Certain folks will end up absorbing a great deal of the actual floor time, just because either they're louder, maybe they're very familiar, very confident with a lot of points, maybe they just have talking points, maybe they just have a certain type of personality, or they antagonize people or something like that. And that's why it's just that's why I think we need more folks within the discussion itself, because I'm like, wait a second, if we got over 7 billion people in the world here, how many folks are actually sharing what they truly think and believe and their thoughts and ideas with the world? And how many of them are just kind of like, maybe they have like this idea that would be great, but they shared it with one person. That person, for a particular reason, thinks it's a stupid idea or something like that. It's just like, dude, if we can have more people engaged, and if we're going to, because that's a lot of times when folks will say, it's like, well, most people believe this, or so many folks believe this. It's like, okay, do they? Do they? Or is that what we just kind of have from doing a few surveys and stuff like that? Is it a scientific survey? Have we controlled for as many things as we control for? Because if we can truly get what as many people as possible actually are thinking, what they're actually just believe that they should do, and we can at least engage them. If you don't agree with somebody, they can gain more information. This is how you learn. You have conversation, you read things, you get additional information. That's the biggest thing I took away from Sam Harris, as far as if somebody disagrees with you, or if you're going to update your opinion or change your mind or something. Like, if your idea and thought on a particular issue, all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of new information you did not have before, if that's going to change it, that's okay. That's because you now have additional information. If you're working off of inaccurate information, do you just keep on basing off the inaccurate information? You want as much good data as you can, because you can make the best decisions then.
It depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to be able to have that as your identity, and your worldview is your identity, then it comes to a point of, if somebody changes your worldview, they are changing your identity to that person. And as I said before, I have noticed that people now wear their views as their identity. And because it comes to that way, people cannot have honest discussions anymore. Because if I was to have a discussion with you, because you don't have your political views, and vice versa for me, as my identity, and I am willing to have my views changed, because they are not my identity, they are not who I am, they do not define me as me, we are able to have that conversation and change it. Now, if you have a point where they actually have that as their identity, their worldview, as who they are, as a person, their core beliefs are that way, then you're not going to change that person's mind. You're not going to be able to change that person's theory on anything and have a discussion on it, because that person's mind is stuck to who they are. And if you change that person's mind on that, then you change who they are in their perspective. And very, very quickly, the reason why I say this is because I've noticed that that's a lot. Now, it does tend to be more on the left than it does on the right, but it still happens on the right as well, to a very high degree, where it comes to a point of, oh, I'm a libertarian, or oh, I'm a conservative. Well, you're not actually a conservative because you believe in this, this, and this. No, I'm a conservative. Fuck you. But you believe in this. You're not actually a conservative. You don't have to stick to a label to be able to define who you are. You can use that as a base. I'm a conservative that's socially liberal. That doesn't mean fuck all. It just means that I like a conservative view, but I'm more socially liberal. I want more people to be able to do whatever they want to do, as long as it doesn't affect anybody else.
Is it because we like unlocking achievements and ranks in video games? because like it really seems like some folks like you said, like they'll, if they're part of whatever they believe becomes literally part of them. It's kind of like, at least for me in World of Warcraft, if all of a sudden you hit Grand Marshal, you could put Grand Marshal because you've been PvPing for far too long or something like that. It's just like those are certain things within there. It's just nothing wrong as folks at PvP. I PvP'd far too much myself, but I digress. Just
I would actually agree with you, to be fair, not about the PvP, but I would actually agree with you that yes, people actually put their banners, let's put it as that, their banners, what describes them. You look at the Twitter bios, for instance. Now, I'm not going to go that I really disagree or even care about if they put they, them, z, zer, and whatever. I don't really care. It's up to them. They do what they want. But you can know, as say somebody who's more right leaning like I am, or even as yourself probably, that if you see them as that as their bio, you can kind of have the preconception of what their politics may be. Now, that doesn't always necessitate it as truth, but you have that schema. You see that word there, and you think, "Fuck me, you're conservative. You're a commie. You're a socialist. You're this. You're that." And before the conversation has even started, because that's been put into the title, your preconceptions are already right. I need to fight this person, and not physically, but you have to combat their view because they've already put that as a banner, like a red flag to a bull. Some people will see that and go, right, I want to now go against you because of this reason. Now, me, myself, I don't really see it as that way. I want to ask them the reasons why they think that, but I'm of a particular mindset where I like to ask the questions of why rather than the questions of, let's say, I want this and you're against it because of that. I don't like making the argument for the person. I like to try and let them make their own argument.
See, a lot of time when I look at some of that, just within the instance of basically having preconceived notions about what somebody might be because of whatever is in their bio or certain things that they have there. Okay, no, I understand. It's like we all do have preconceptions and stuff like that. That's something that you could call it preconceived biases and stuff like that. Yeah, we're all biased in certain ways. We all enjoy to prefer what we prefer. Should we acknowledge certain things? I personally believe so, because if it is true, then hey, we have better truth. But my big thing is, I think one of the issues we run into, and I got to highlight this as somebody that considers himself part of the greater trolling community, is that you take that. I factor in about a 20% troll rate on this internet. Mm-hmm. So when I say that, because at least at that level, it makes sense to me. I look and see what's going on, and then every once in a while, you'll see somebody that'll say something either so salacious or in a particular way or something like that. Maybe that person is trying to be hateful. They absolutely might be. They also might just be attempting to commit some fuckwitchery or something like that, or just trying to like see what's going on. It's just when I factor in about 20% of the internet and some of the things that are going on, it's just trolling. Some of it lighthearted, some of it really dank and highly questionable. Yes, when I factor that in, the internet makes sense to me, and it's just I feel like a lot of folks sometimes will see that. And we'll just be, oh, lol cow. And I do base this off of some of the a wise Romanian who went undercover into certain SJW areas. And he's like, some folks they're just throwing shit on the wall to see what sticks and everything. Just because you throw enough stuff out there, somebody might come along and be like, you really have a point there. And this can happen on the right or the left. So I'm just like, when I apply that, I'm like, I think if you were to remove that, you'd have a better view of what's going on. I just think that a lot of the trolling obscures a lot of it.
No, I completely not agree with you. I think another thing that really puts a barrier in place for people that are trying to have a conversation is the fact of that they don't want to self-critique. Because they don't want to self-critique, they don't want to have other people critique to them about them. Because again, they think that that's actually criticism towards them. People are so afraid of having creative criticism thrown their way to how that they can improve. They're almost offended by the idea of saying, look, you're not perfect, you could do this to make yourself better. I've noticed that a lot with people that I go to college with, that if you say, well, oh, could you do this a little bit better, they look so offended that you've literally took a knife to them and stabbed them in the heart. You've literally cut them apart because you said, well, you're good, but you could do better. And I do think that is magnified to an almost infinite level when it comes to the internet, that people don't actually want to have any sort of form of self-critique, and they don't want any form of criticism, because if you are to critique, then you're wrong, and if you're wrong, you don't gain those brownie points, and if you don't get those brownie points, you don't get those followers, and if you don't get those followers, then your life's not worth anything.
It's that seems like a very sad cycle right there. And I think the number one thing that I think of when you lay that out, CSG, is I think a lot of it comes down to pride. And I
Hmm.
believe it was St. Augustine, according to the Google Internet here, that said it was pride that changed angels into devils. It is
Hmm.
humanity that makes men as angels.
Yeah.
I think that's something we should try to remember, whether or not you're a overly religious person. I think the metaphor stands.
Well, the thing that I really hate about, let's say, the skeptic community, when it comes to the point of religiosity, that they take a point of everything that has anything to do with religion is now bad. Not that there are good aspects to religion. Everything, as you said before, is now turned into a binary. Religion's bad regardless, apparently, and some people think it's good regardless, apparently, for anything. Whatever happened about merging more than one idea together? Whatever happened to being able to say that maybe we should have a form of a socialistic idea when it comes to running a government? Most people agree with forms of taxes. Does that mean that everybody that agrees with forms of taxes is now somehow inherently a socialist? Or do we just agree that that's a good idea to be able to help society as a whole now? What actually constitutes as a good idea? Is that actually, as V has said before, seeing what actually sticks by throwing it against the wall and having it tumble into the marketplace of ideas? Or is it just sticking into an echo chamber and, not having anything challenged? Because I know what one I prefer.
Well, that's the thing. It's just I think we're starting to get better at having some of these discussions because they are possible. As much of a hubbub as came about with that Sargon and Spencer thing before and everything like that, I remember. I think it was like 4 or 5 months later. There was a thing I think with like V Arch, Warhammer, JF, and then another gentleman. I apologize, I forget your name, sir. But they had a discussion, and what V and Arch had said before, they're like, we're going to go in here and we are not going to do any ad hom attacks. And
Mm,
we are going to attempt to have a discussion. And I listened to that discussion. Was there tension?
mm,
Yes, I believe at points there was some tension, but I don't really remember like any over the top screaming or really blood sports. And like
sure.
an actual conversation was had. I mean, just again, according to Rule 15, it didn't do as well as a lot of other things because it wasn't over the top and a complete dumpster fire, but it is possible. I think we need to better incentivize a lot of these things because, and this is why I think like there is got to be a point in between like just whole blood sports, which is just kind of like, oh, you kind of have like a tiff in a pub or something, you go outside and just start like hitting each other with bottles
Mm,
and stuff, trying to destroy each other. I think there has to be a point somewhere between that and then like a Professor Peterson GJEC, which is more of like a mixed mental arts or something like that, extremely high level. There's got to be something that a lot more folks can kind of take place in, which I think was the kind of idea of blood sports initially, where it's like it's more like the WWE thing. It's like you kind of have an over the top haymaker or something. But the thing is, with professional wrestling, when you're within the business, based upon what I've heard from folks, is that yeah, you got to do an over the top. You got to put on a show, but you got to keep doing that throughout the entire year. You got to do that for a couple hundred days a year.
yeah,
If
yeah,
you completely destroy more or less everybody, it's like, well, who are you gonna have discussions with anymore if you've literally driven them off the internet? I'm like, come
yeah.
on.
Well, I mean, the good thing about the internet, and it is a good thing, is that you can have the spears of it being political discourse, having channels in general. I was going to say like mine, but no, not like mine, because mine's been into the blood sports as well as normal stuff. So not necessarily like mine, but in general, you can have channels where you have genuine political discourse, being able to have the idea of having conversations and understanding of different political ideas. And there will be people that come to those channels to specifically watch that. And there is nothing wrong with having separate channels where you have blood sports, where you have the people come to have the sound bites, the battering of people from different aspects of political persuasions or religious persuasions. There's nothing wrong with those aspects. But the point is that we don't actually have those channels that separate themselves from one or the other. They kind of try to merge themselves into both groups rather than it being Pacifics. Everybody tries to be a general or generalized.
Everyone's trying to power level their main.
Yes, rather than actually.
That's the thing. Oh, I have my most subscribers on here, so I want to do this and power level this because now I have more control. I get more views. I get more cash. The idea, I mean, that's logical sense. And actually, was one reason why I actually do have like respect for like a guy like Omegon or something, because he took his channel, like his main channel, Omegon, and rather than he realizing that a lot of political stuff, not everybody is already on top of that, he kind of has his Moisky Live as basically more of a news political coverage. He does more of a social commentary, which, I mean, maybe is still, a lot of folks would say maybe kind of out there or something, but is not necessarily as, I don't know, as controversial per se. And then he has his gaming channels and everything. He has a reading channel. So he has done that. I mean, this is literally just using models that we've had before, because let's face it, dude, at 10 o'clock on a Friday, it's like, if all of a sudden I turn on the Hallmark channel, there's a good chance I'm going to hear about like a feel good like family story or something, and the family's getting together for Christmas or something. And then all of a sudden, if I put on Showtime, there's a good chance that someone's head is getting blown off or somebody's getting what. That's the thing. It's a differentiation, but you have that expectation.
Oh yeah, exactly. And the thing that I like about Omegon's, as you said, different channels, is that okay, he built his channel up on his political discourse, but now it gets to the point of, well, what does that person actually think when he's doing his truck simulator or his plane simulator? What does he do when he's playing this game? What does he do when he's reading the books? What does he like? You get the intrigue, and then you find out a different side to that person. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that those channels do as well. Maybe they do worse. Maybe they do better. Who knows? Different people like different things. But the point is, because you're doing those different contents, or Megon's doing those different contents, then it comes to a point of you get more of a nuance of the person. You don't get the video that's now, as you said before, sensationalized to play up to a character. You now get more of a relaxed person. You now get the idea of what that person actually thinks and actually feels, or at least a sense of it. Now, when it comes to certain people, let's use Sargon of Akkad, because everybody's going to know who I mean and what I mean by these types of things. Sargon of Akkad is a troll. He will gladly and admittedly say to that under oath, he is an internet troll. He always has been. He's a shitlord. Now, yeah, sure, he does some really great political discourse, but as we see by him going into mainstream politics, because he is a shitlord and because he is a troll, his politics can never truly be, let's say, explored honestly and truly, because people always bring up the fact of what he's done previously, because there is no separation. Because people will see him as Sargon of Akkad, not Carl Benjamin. And most people don't differentiate between the two people. They classify him as the same. But to be fair, though, he did play the Sargon of Akkad as the politician rather than him changing to be Carl Benjamin.
That's the thing. It's just when you're trying to bolster your arguments and you're citing the size of your YouTube channel.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, that's a thing. But my biggest thing is with the whole Sargon fiasco and everything. You're looking at what's going on. It's like, okay, folks. Again, they continued, as people said, to bring up the Jess Phillips stuff, the Jess Phillips stuff, and it's like, okay, how do you just said, well, I was just trying to get a rise or do this or something like that. And if it was just a quick thing, but I remember he did a live stream like a couple of years ago, and I think it was either with V or Harmful Opinions or something. Sure. And he was on there and he's like, what can I do that would elicit something that is not necessarily against the law or whatnot? And he came up with it. And he even said, man, he's like, I sat there for a while just thinking. And like, see, that's the thing. It was premeditated. It just wasn't like he come back from the pub. It's like, oh, let me just F with this MP or something. And he says that along with the whole context. It's just like, dude, he writes that. He sits there thinking about doing it. like a month or so after MP Phillips comes up sharing a story about her being sexually assaulted.
I completely and utterly agree with you. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with the story aspect of it, but I completely agree with you on the Sargon aspect. That everything that he did on that aspect was completely premeditated. He did it to get a rise. He did it to be able to get subscribers. He did it to be able to get more eyes onto him and his channel. But the only problem that comes with that is that you do get the people that will completely and utterly disagree with you and will hold you to account for that. As the saying goes, the internet never forgets, and you can never delete anything from the internet. All you can do, as you quite rightly said at that point, or what I was expecting Sargon to do, especially as being a component of free speech, is going, that's how I felt at the time. I will apologize for it offending Jess Phillips, and I apologize for it offending you, but I still have the right to be able to say that, and I did not do anything wrong, but I'm sorry for the offense.
Well, my big thing is like, dude, that could have been a golden opportunity. He could have at least tried to do something like President Obama said and try to have like a beer summit. He ended up going in a different direction with his references to beer, which I don't think boded well for him and just made him seem like more of a prick. But just the issue with that is I think it comes down to just the code of trolling. You live by the troll, you die by the troll.
Yep. But that's the thing, though, because he didn't differentiate himself from being Sargon to Carl Benjamin, the politician. He was then running as Sargon. And because he carried on running as Sargon, everything that he's done on his internet persona is now fair game. Now, that doesn't mean that I dislike Sargon. I actually don't dislike Sargon. I think that he's doing everything he possibly can for his reasons, and maybe they are good reasons, I don't know. But I don't think that he's inherently a bad person. I never have done. But if you're going to have your 20-year plan, and your 20-year plan starts off with you almost destroying a political party because you ran as them and you didn't want to apologize for something that you did on the internet to be able to make an actual point,
Wait, UKIP's still around?
Sort of.
Because this was one of the unfortunate things, just because like the Sargon Grim Reaper meme, I'm not saying coincidence correlation equals causation. All I know is it didn't do well. Wait. When Dr. Winters and Kev were just going over that, it's just like, don't look good, man.
No, I completely not agree with you, but that's the thing. Carl himself, as Kyle, not as Sargon, could so easily have switched that round. And as the videos from Mr. Metica come out, he kept on trying to double down. Oh, my wife's been sexually assaulted. I've been sexually assaulted. This has happened to me. Well, this has happened to that. People agree with me, not you. It's just, no, be a politician. Say that you're sorry for causing the offense. You didn't necessarily mean it in that way. You wanted to draw attention to the fact that Jess Phillips didn't actually want to initiate amends issues in Parliament. Job done.
Well, my big thing is if he had to just try to have this as like a moment of unity, like, listen, I am happy to apologize to MP Phillips. If I have truly hurt her in person, let's sit down at a pub. We'll have a beer. We don't need to have cameras or anything. And you know what? He can put that out there.
Exactly.
And then MP Phillips, she does not have to accept that at all. But the thing is, if she didn't, then it's like, okay, at least he made the effort. And if she does accept, maybe we could have some unity. But unfortunately, it's just kind of like we were talking about, like a lot of this politics. It just seems like we need to have the advantage for our side because we are right and the other side is wrong and evil. And as soon as you get to the point where somebody isn't necessarily just wrong, but they're evil, what do you do to evil people? And this is just something that I remember back in high school learning about, like World War II as a sophomore. It's like we were straight up told, it's like, oh yeah, there was a lot of propaganda and stuff, because are you really going to go out there and just like feel confident and just be all right for signing up and just killing a whole bunch of other human beings because, oh, well, they're doing their stuff for their family and their country? It's like, no, you make them appear like a freaking army of demons that need to be exterminated and stuff like that. Like, this was the propaganda that they were showing us, and this is what they were explaining to us in school. And it's like, I heard that, and now it's like, are we doing that to each other? Because
we're doing that right now. Yes, we are literally dehumanizing, as we've already kind of tried to establish, that we're now trying to make people's arguments now to the side. And if you say that the side's evil, then as soon as anybody brings up a Republican argument or a Democrat argument, they are now a Democrat or a Republican, and we hate those people because of these reasons. And it's okay to hate that person because they're this. You're now dehumanizing the person and you're not listening to the arguments at all.
Yeah, I think any time we're going to say all of any group or community is
Exactly that.
evil, we should be wary, especially if we are judging based upon the actions of a few.
Exactly.
And you definitely got to acknowledge what is reality and stuff like that. But to heap the sin of few upon all,
No,
I
I
just don't
agree.
seem right.
No, I completely not really agree. I hate when everybody generalizes. For instance, if we have somebody like a Jessica Yaniv, that's now to the point of obviously everybody generally hates her for obvious reasons. But so many people are still trying to use her as a focal point for how all trans people think. And it's just, no, she's not a focal point. This is not how this works. If this works, then anybody that's racist on the right is now a whole, should we say, figurehead for what the right now means. Don't try and put these candlelights onto these people or spotlights onto these people to say that these are the people that represent this, because when it happens to your side, you're going to disagree with it. So why would you do it to somebody else? Live by the sword, die by the sword.
Exactly. And I don't think I could have said it much better myself. But yeah, CSG, we've been going for an hour and a half. I realize you had limited time, dude. Thank you so much for coming on. Any final thoughts for the people out there on this internet stuff and things?
The only final thoughts that I have, especially to do with what we've talked about today, is go out and find somebody that you actually disagree with, completely and utterly disagree with, and see if you can actually have a conversation. Now, if you're going to know that you disagree with them on politics, talk about music. Try and find a way of humanizing that person or rehumanizing that person. And I don't say that to patronize anybody. I say that as a point of myself when I used to begin with politics, where I used to try and say that you think this because you're this. Try and actually ask them what they think, not put what you think into their head, because you're always going to lose that way. You may win, you may think that you've won the argument, but all you've done is put a straw man into that place and not actually had a genuine conversation. And that's not to belittle anybody, it's honestly to say, try it and see if you can actually have an actual conversation with somebody rather than just trying to talk bullet points or stratagem or anything else like that. Just have a conversation with somebody, especially somebody that you know you disagree with. See how it goes. And you never know, you might actually find out you have more in common than what actually divides you. And maybe you might even be able to work together on common causes.
Thank you so much, CSG. And I was going to try to do something very enlightening and everything, but in light of those closing remarks, I'm just going to sum up what I touched upon a little bit earlier. After the rally to restore Sandy and or turtles that happened to be occurring during the Straight Pride Parade and Let's Take Back Our Pride events, when a wise woman once said, "Y'all are idiots," in that basically, I'm pretty sure they had to cancel the Korean festival because they had to pull Boston police assets from there. Whereas I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about these folks that are like starting to get ready to get into scuffles and stuff like that. So I'm like, if the scenario was different, like I'm pretty sure if most all of these same folks were at the Korean festival because there was a concert that all those folks liked right there, I'm pretty sure they'd be drinking beer up next to one each other and getting along. So like CSG said, it's like, you can talk to people and stuff like that, but don't necessarily just go out there and say you are wrong. It's just like if you disagree with somebody, it's just ask them, well, what brought you to that, and just kind of like get where they're coming from, because you know what, maybe you'll learn something. Maybe your mind will get changed a little bit, or as they explain it and you share, maybe you'll change their mind, because that's how we learn from one another. So hey, thank you everybody that's joined us on this internet, anybody that may watch in the future, and of course to our guest CSG here. Thank you all for watching. And peace out, everybody. Well, I hit the button. I hit the button.